Okay, welcome to Economics 231, Chapter 3. This is Dr. Yohe, Gadsden State. If you come in late, that's no problem here. We had a little issue, but we'll get it all fixed. What we're going to talk about today is the rest of demand. We'll cause a change in demand. Remember, a change in demand is a shift in the curve. I don't know what this just did. Here we go. I have no idea what I just did. Around it. All right, we're getting this technical issue fixed here, and I apologize. Okay, there we go. So what can cause a change in demand? What can cause a change in demand? The first thing is the number of buyers in the market. We said that that was directly related to demand. So an increase in the number of buyers in the market will increase demand. A number of buyers in the market decreases, that will decrease demand. The next thing we have is taste and preferences, directly related to demand. If the Dodgers win the World Series like they did last year, that will increase taste and preferences because people prefer to wear the gear of champions, so they will increase the demand for Dodger gear. We talked about inverse and normal goods last class. When it comes to income, a normal good, most of the things you think of, where if your income goes up, that will cause an increase in your demand. We talked about the fact that people's incomes were going up because they were getting these stimulus checks, the Biden checks. And when income goes up, that might cause an increase in demand for investments like Bitcoin. So that would increase the demand for Bitcoin. Inferior goods, there are some of those. They're usually goods that you don't really want, but you buy because your income is low. An example of that might be, for me, macaroni and cheese. When I was very poor, as a grad student, I ate macaroni and cheese almost every day. I had, about 24 boxes a month when my income was $400, we talked about. Then when I got my first job, my income went up to $4,000 a month, and I stopped buying macaroni and cheese. So there's an inverse relationship between your income and an inferior good like macaroni and cheese. Your income goes up, your demand for macaroni and cheese decreases. We shift that demand curve to the left. The next thing we have is expectations of consumers. And here I just put common sense. Let's say that, that we suspected that there was going to be a war in the Middle East and that this was going to drive up the price of gasoline next week. So next week, the price of gasoline is going to double. That would cause an increase in our demand right now. We'd say, hey, I'm going to go out and fill up my tank and maybe any gas cans that I have now when I normally wouldn't, because I believe the price is going to double next week. So that would be expectations of consumers. And we use common sense. The final thing we have here is it's missing on the slide, and that is the price of related goods, okay? And there are substitutes and complements. And I'm going to go ahead a couple slides here to go over that. So a substitute, these are goods that compete with one another for consumer purchases. You could think of this as like Fords and Chevys, okay, or Pepsi and Coke. Those are considered by economists to be substitute goods. And like when we talked about normal goods and inferior goods, these things are subjective. So economists sort of look at what they are to people in general. And for most people, Coke and Pepsi are substitute goods. For a substitute good, okay, if the price increases for a good that has a substitute, the demand curve for the substitute good increases. So we say that the price of a good and demand for its substitute are directly related. If the price of Pepsi goes up, demand for Coke goes up. And you can see this if you go to Walmart. If Pepsi has an increase in their price, then the Pepsi rack is empty and the Coke rack, the Pepsi rack is full and the Coke rack will be empty. If Pepsi dropped their price, if Pepsi went on sale, then you would see the Pepsi rack is empty and the Coke rack is full. So they're both selling at, say, $1.50 for a 2 liter, and Pepsi raises their price to $1.75. What would you expect to see happen to the demand for Coke? Would it go up or would it go down? And of course, the answer is it would go down. Now, if the price of Pepsi and Coke were both $1.50, and then Pepsi went on sale to $1 a 2 liter, what would you expect to see happen? You would expect to see the demand for Coke to decrease, and you would see the Pepsi rack is empty and the Coke rack is full. So that's for a substitute good. These are goods that are closely related, okay, that compete with one another for consumer purchases. Now, in reality, every good is really a substitute good. If I spend more money on Pepsi, that means I have less money available to spend on lawnmowers or on beef or on chicken, okay? But we look for goods that are closely related, that are basically viewed as being the same. And we look for these close substitutes when we talk about substitute goods. When the price of a good decreases, that causes the demand curve for its substitute good to decrease. And we've talked about that already with Coke and Pepsi. So there is a direct relationship between price and quantity here when we talk about price and demand, my fault, when we talk about substitutes. On the other hand, complementary goods are goods that are jointly consumed with one another. You could think of peanut butter and jelly, or gasoline and Hummers, the cars. Or you could think about computers and printers. These are all examples of complementary goods. You usually don't consume one without the other, okay? Now, when the price increases for a good, that causes the demand for its complement to decrease. So if the price of computers went up, the demand for its complementary good, printers, would go down. And that's because it would become more expensive to buy both a computer and a printer together, which most people do. So because it's more expensive to buy a computer and a printer together, fewer computers and printers will be bought. Fewer computers will be bought because the price of computers went up. That causes a change in the quantity demanded for computers. So we move up the demand curve for computers. When that happens, quantity demanded for computers would decrease. Because of that decrease in the quantity demanded for computers, people would be buying fewer printers to go with them. That would cause a decrease in the demand curve, or a decrease in demand for printers if the price of computers went up. Okay. On the opposite side of things, and this typically makes more sense to us, what if computers went on sale? What if they cut the price of computers in half? So instead of spending, $500 for a nice laptop, you only had to pay $250, or instead of paying $800 for a nice desktop, you only had to pay $400. That would cause a decrease in the, an increase in the quantity demanded for computers. We'd move down the demand curve for computers. That would cause quantity demanded for computers to go up when the price decreases. People are going to buy more computers, and they're going to want more printers to go with them. So that would increase the demand for printers. So there's an inverse relationship between the price of a good, in this case computers. The price of computers went down. The demand for its complement, printers, is going to go up. They're going to move in opposite directions. So if a good is a complementary good, peanut butter and jelly, price of peanut butter goes up, the demand for jelly is going to go down. The price of gasoline goes up, the demand for Hummers goes down. Hummers get very poor gas mileage, at least they used to. They don't make them anymore. And that happened when the gas crisis hit. When gas prices started creeping up to $4, a Hummer gets like 7 or 8 gallon miles to get to the gallon. Demand for Hummers fell off and GM stopped making them. Okay, so the price of gasoline went up, the demand for Hummers went down. Okay. The next thing we're going to talk about is supply. Supply represents the choice-making behavior of sellers. We have a law of supply. The law of supply says that there is a direct relationship between the price of a good and the quantity sellers are willing and able to offer for sale in a defined time period, ceteris paribus. Okay. Now, a key thing to note here is that one, we're talking about the price of a good and this whole thing here we call quantity supplied, and we abbreviate that Q sub S, quantity supplied. So if the price of a good goes up, quantity supplied goes down. Quantity supplied is used as a shorthand for saying that the quantity sellers are willing and able to offer for sale in a defined time period, ceteris paribus. So instead of saying this whole mouthful here, we just say quantity demanded. So if price goes up, there is a direct relationship between price and quantity supplied. It's going to go up also. If, on the other hand, the price of a good goes down, quantity supplied is going to decrease with it. Okay. So that direct relationship means price and quantity supplied move in the same direction. If price goes up, quantity supplied goes up. If price goes down, quantity supplied goes down. Okay. That gives a supply curve a positive slope. If you remember from Appendix 1A, we said that if as X gets bigger, whatever's on your X-axis, in this case Q, if that causes Y to get bigger, in this case price, that direct relationship causes the demand, the supply curve in this case, to have a positive slope, to slope upward and to the right. If we were to calculate the slope here, and to calculate a slope, I'm really bad writing with this thing, I apologize. That's equal to the change in Y, that's a delta there, divided by the change in X, okay? So if we were calculating the slope of this demand curve, we say we'll pick one point to be 0.1. Oops, I gotta go back, my fault. Okay. We pick one point to be 0.1. When I get to the right slide, there we go. One more, there we go. We'll make this 0.1, make this point 2. Each point has a Q and a P value. This is on the x-axis, that's on the y. So we're going to say P2, the price at point 2, minus the price at point 1. Divided by Q2 minus Q1. And that's going to be our slope. So P2 is the price at point 2. We arbitrarily picked one. It doesn't matter which one you pick to be 1 or 2, you're going to get the right answer. So this is point 2 here. And we look over here and see that at point 2, the price is $10. So I've got $10 minus the price at P1. P1 is $6. It looks like 5, but it's 6. Okay. That goes on top of Q2, which is 30. That's quantity supplied at the second point, minus Q1, which is 20. So that's going to give us 4 over 10 or 0.4. So the slope of this line is positive, and that indicates that there is a direct relationship between the price of a good and quantity demanded. We would get this information from a price schedule. We might go to sellers in the area and say, oh, this might be for quantity or for compact discs. We might go to Walmart and say, oh, at a price of $20, how many CDs will you offer for sale on the market per day at that price? And they'd say 40. Okay, so this point A here, you take the X value and the Y value, that's where it gets its name. Its X value is its quantity, so we're going to say Q first. And then its Y value is the price. So point A here is going to be 40 CDs per month, comma, and that's a dollar sign, can't tell, at a price of $20. Point B, at point B, 30 CDs, that's on the x-axis, so we put 30, comma, 30 CDs per day, comma, at a price of $10 per CD. And I'll let y'all do point C by yourself. What is the name for point B? The X coordinate, comma, Y coordinate. If you get confused, you can make sure you put X and Y above the variables. So quantities on my x-axis, Y is on my, or prices on my y-axis. So real quick, come up with a quantity, come up with the coordinates for this point, also called its name in this class to make it easier. And I'll give you a second to do that. And it's going to be 20 CDs per day at a price of, that's a dollar sign, you can't tell, $6 per CD. All right, then we would graph those points going back here. We'd graph those points and then draw a line to demonstrate the law of supply, which we just talked about here, that there's that direct relationship between the price of a good and the quantity sellers are willing to offer in a defined time period, ceteris paribus. That means they're going to move in the same direction. If we increase the price, more CDs will be offered on the market for sale. If we decrease the price, fewer CDs. Price and quantity supplied are moving in the same direction. Okay. And we got that from this supply schedule, where if we could, we'd ask a local store at how many CDs are you willing and able to offer at different possible prices. As the price goes down, they offer fewer CDs on the market. So the next thing we've got here is, what is a market? And a market is any arrangement in which buyers and sellers interact to determine the price and quantity of goods and services exchanged. Okay. When you think of a market, you think of a supermarket, right? That's a market for groceries and other things, right? The internet is a market. eBay is a market. Okay. Any place, the New York Stock Exchange is a market. If you want to buy stocks, you go to the New York Stock Exchange. That's an arrangement in which buyers and sellers interact to determine the price and quantity of goods and services exchanged. Now, we calculated earlier individual supply curve. It's not as much interest to us as market supply. The market supply curve, we do the same thing we did for demand. And there we horizontally sum the quantities supplied at various prices that might prevail in the market. So for each one of these individual suppliers on a market, we'll add up how much they're going to supply at a particular price, say $20. We add the amount that both suppliers are willing to supply at that price. That becomes market supply. And the next slide will make that clearer to you. So here, this is Super Sound and High Vibes. They sell CDs. At a price of $25, Super Sound will sell 25 CDs, and High Vibes will sell 35. So we add these two quantities together, and at a price of $25, 60 CDs will be offered on the market. Drop the price to 20. You can see that Super Sound here is going to offer 20 plus the 30 that High Vibes will offer. Total or market supply becomes 50. Now, we could have more suppliers in our market, but we're limiting it to 2 to make it simple. But you can see, we just find out off its supply schedule how much each supplier will offer on the market at that price, and then we add it. And that becomes market supply. So what I want you to do is write these points down. We'll call this one point A, point B, point C, point D, and point E. Okay, give me their coordinates. So I'll do the first one for you, but you're going to do the rest. So point A, if I could draw an A, its value, where its coordinates are 60 CDs. I'm sorry, my fault. We're going to put the X value first. So there will be at a price, yeah, that's right, 60 CDs, my fault. 60 CDs per day will be offered for sale at a price of $25. Okay. Now, what I need you to do, whether you're at home watching on live or on video, is go ahead and write down the points for B, C, D, and E. Okay. It'll give you time to do it. Point B, what is its X value? What is its Y value? And I noticed Parker just came in. Parker, I'm recording this, and what you missed will be available for you, okay? Can you hear me, Parker?
I can hear you.
Okay. All right. So Parker, what we're doing here is the market supply curve. Its X value is the total quantity supplied on the market. These are two individual suppliers, Super Sound and High Vibes, in the market for CDs. And this is the price. At a price of $25, Super Sound would offer 25 CDs on the market. High Vibes would offer 30. They're the only two suppliers in this market. So if that's the case, at a price of $25, we add these two quantities together. It comes out that 60 CDs will be offered on the market at that $25 price. I did the first one, and then I'm having everybody else, whether you're live or watching this later taped, do that for points B, C, D, and E, and then we're going to graph a market supply curve for CDs here. Okay, so I'll give you a couple minutes. And when you write down the coordinates for a point, I like to call it the name of that point, just to make it easier. You do whatever's on the x-axis first. For supply and demand, quantity is always on the x, price is always on the y. So I just put an x and a y here so I don't get confused. Okay, the x value always comes first, that's quantity. The y value always comes second, that's, I'm sorry, that's a mistake here. Oops. I meant to write that y here. The y value is price. So go ahead and on a piece of paper, write these down. They're coordinates for points B, C, D, and E, and then we'll graph them in a second. Parker, let me know when you're done. Are you still working, Parker? I'll take that as no. All right. So on the next slide here, not this one, not that one. That's the next one I want. We're going to graph that. Now, if you remember, point A, we said at a price of $25, 60 CDs would be supplied. So you do this either way. I'm going to go over to 60 CDs and up to $25 per CD and put a point. And then at a price of $15, 40 CDs would be offered on the market. So I'm gonna go over to 40 CDs, up to $15, put another point. That was point A. And I believe we had that one labeled point C. And then we'd label the other ones. We graph the other points at a price of $20 per CD. I think it was 50 CDs will be offered on the market. So we go over to 50 and up to 20. And that was point B. And then at 10, we don't have it on here, but 30 CDs were offered. So we could have gone to 30 and done that, but we didn't. We cut this graph off just to keep it short. Then we connect those with a straight line to demonstrate the law of supply. Again, these supply curves aren't real. No one has one. One thing we know about supply curves is that eventually at some point they go vertical. And that's because there's only a physical limited number of CDs available in the Gadsden area today for us to sell. Okay. There could be some in a warehouse, but at some point, if we believe the price was so high, we'd offer all those CDs for sale. Okay, we wouldn't hold any back for tomorrow. And that would be this vertical section here. Okay, you can't produce more, you can't make more CDs because they had to be produced a month ago in order to be here in Gadsden. So that curve goes vertical at some point. A lot of supply curves are mostly vertical. Okay. Now, just like with demand, I've got another slide here that says it's important to know the difference between a change in the quantity supplied, and that's going to be caused by a change in price and a change in price only. Just like last lecture, we said that a change in the quantity demanded is caused by a change in price only. So that's one thing. I need to know the difference between that and a change in supply. A change in supply is where we shift the curve. And that happens when we violate our ceteris paribus conditions, okay? When we allow something other, go back here real quick. When we allow something other than price to change that affects supply, we violate that ceteris paribus assumption. When that happens, our old demand curve, this one is no good, or supply curve, I'm sorry, I said demand. So this is S1. We'll have to draw another one, S2. So when something other than price changes, we're going to get a change in supply. When price changes, and that's where we shift the whole curve, we draw a brand new curve. And that's because we violated our ceteris paribus assumption. On the other hand, if price changes, we designed the supply curve, just like we did the demand curve, but we designed the supply curve to take into account changes in price. So we haven't violated ceteris paribus when price changes. So we just move up or down the same supply curve. And we'll reinforce that here in a second. What happens when price changes? So if the price of CDs changes, what happens? That's going to cause a change in the quantity supplied. So whenever you hear a change in the quantity of something, supply or demand, you know that the only thing that could cause that is a change in price. And a change in the quantity supplied, just like the change in the quantity demanded, is represented by a movement up or down the curve. So here we had a price of $6 and we raised it to 10. That would cause a movement up this supply curve from point A to point B. And the only thing that changes is quantity supplied. It goes up from 20 CDs per day to 30 CDs per day when we raise the price. On your slides here, right, if you're taking notes, write only. I wish I was better at writing with this pen. Only a change in price can cause a change in quantity supplied. Remembering back when we talked about demand, only a change in price can cause a change in quantity demanded. Only a change in price can cause a change in quantity supplied. And that is just a movement up or down the same curve. If we increase price, then quantity supplied is going to increase. We're going to move up the curve. If we decrease the price, right? So we increase the price. If we were to decrease the price, say from point C, $20 a CD to 10, so we're decreasing the price. That would cause us to move down the supply curve when we decrease price from 20 back down to 10. And that would cause a decrease in quantity supplied from 40 to 30 CDs per day. When something other than price changes, that will cause a change in supply. And just like with demand, when something other than price changed that affected demand, when something other than price changes that affects supply, we got to change the curve. We got to shift it. Okay, we call it a shift. We're really changing the curve, just like we're changing supply here. And that's because we violated our ceteris paribus assumption. We allowed something other than price to change that affects how much of a good or a service producers are willing and able to offer for sale during a defined time period, ceteris paribus. So here, I'm going to go back. Here's our supply curve. And in this case, we're going to say that there is a new technology that comes on the market that improves the making of CDs, a new technology. We get an increase in technology. That would make it cheaper to produce CDs. And if it's cheaper to produce CDs, we would offer more CDs at any given price. So you can see here, when we gain this new technology, we'll offer more CDs on the market at any given price. And that's because of profit going up. If the cost of producing 20 CDs decreases, then that increases the profitability of CDs. If it becomes more profitable to produce something, you'll produce more of it. So that's what causes this shift to the right in the supply curve. More CDs will be offered on the market, here 35, on the new curve, than was offered on the market at that same price before we got this increase in technology. We only offered 30. So an increase in technology here would cause an increase in supply. More CDs would be offered on the market. Once again, our right-handed rule fits. Anything to the right is better. That's an increase. Anything to the left, I'm just going to draw a down arrow here, is a decrease. So if we shifted this curve to the left here, that would be a decrease in supply from S1 to S3. I'm working on getting better technology for this. I'm sorry that you have to see my horrible attempt to draw on these things, but I've got better stuff coming. Any questions on that? So any change, write any up here, any change in the non-price determinants of supply will cause a change in supply. So you're probably wondering, what are these non-price determinants of supply? The first one is, a change in the number of sellers in the market. A change in the number of sellers in the market is directly related to supply. An increase in the number of sellers in the market will increase supply. A decrease in the number of sellers will decrease supply. So here, if you get more sellers, that's going to cause an increase in supply, and that's going to, shift the curve out. So if we got more suppliers for CDs, that would shift the curve out from S1 to S2. More CDs would be offered on the market at any given price if we got an increase in the number of sellers. Okay. The next thing, technology. I already showed you that on the previous graph, but an increase in technology will cause an increase in supply, will shift the supply curve to the right. A decrease in technology would shift the curve to the left. Regulations, we talked about this in chapter 1 or chapter 2. Regulations cause a decrease in technology. Firms will pick the best technology to produce goods and services on the free market. When regulations come in, to be effective regulations have to outlaw the most productive technology, forcing producers to use an inferior technology, okay? That decrease in technology caused by the regulation would reduce supply for that particular good or service. The next thing we've got here are resource prices. Resource prices are inversely related to supply. And we all know this. Take an example, something you all know about, oil. Oil is a resource used to produce gasoline. If there's a war in the Middle East or something like that, and the price of a barrel of oil goes up, then it becomes more expensive to make a gallon of gasoline. That makes gasoline, increases the total cost of producing gasoline. That reduces the profitability of making gasoline, and that will cause a decrease in the supply of gasoline. So the price of oil goes up. Oil is a resource used to produce gasoline. That price is inversely related to supply. So if the price of a barrel of oil goes up, a resource used to produce gasoline, that will cause a decrease in the supply of gasoline. We all know this. We know it all the time, right? If I told you, hey, there's going to be a war in the Middle East, everyone knows that gas prices are going to go up and there's going to be less gas supplied at any given price. That less gasoline supplied at any price is a decrease in supply. Taxes and subsidies. Taxes are inversely related to supply. Subsidies are directly related to supply. Now here, when we talk about taxes, we typically talk about what we call excise taxes in economics. And these are taxes placed directly on the production of a good. So if you produce this good, an excise tax says every gallon of gasoline you produce, you have to pay the government a tax, okay? And there are excise taxes on gasoline. There's excise taxes on gasoline. Here in Alabama, playing cards. There's federal, state, and local excise taxes on gasoline. There's state taxes on the production of playing cards. There are state taxes on the production of alcohol and federal taxes, okay? So here, if you increase the tax on producing a good like gasoline, that's going to decrease the supply of it. Because a tax is just like a cost or a resource price cost up here, except for a tax, you don't get anything back in return. So if resource prices go up, say the price of a barrel of oil goes up, the price goes up, but I still get a barrel of oil. If excise taxes on gasoline go up, the producer doesn't necessarily get anything back for them directly. The government just takes the money, but they don't give them anything directly back for it. They might give them something indirectly back later. They might build a pipeline or something that the oil producers find useful, the gasoline producers find useful, but that's not, they're not paying for that. That's just the government took the money and they decided, oh, we'll give you a pipeline, okay? The next thing we've got here is a subsidy. A subsidy is the opposite of an excise tax. Instead of taxing you for producing a good or a service, the government will give you money if you produce it. You are in right now one of the most heavily subsidized industries in the world, education. The government subsidizes education. They subsidize your K through 12. If you went through public school, they pay for the whole thing. You don't pay to go to public school. All of public schools are subsidized by the government. Now, one quick thing to note here is that if the government's paying for the school, yet they're providing a service to children, whose interests do the schools satisfy? And that is the government's, not the students. The students could only get satisfied indirectly if they're able to influence the government to do something for them. Okay. Here at Gadsden State, even if you pay your tuition out of your own pocket, you are still being subsidized. Roughly 2/3 or more of the cost of your education are being subsidized by the state of Alabama. For every credit hour we sell to you, the state of Alabama gives us a subsidy to educate you. Subsidies are directly related to supply. If you subsidize the production of something like education, that's going to increase the supply of it. If you decrease the subsidy, that will decrease the supply of it. Taxes and subsidies are very similar to how we raise our children. If your children are good, they clean their room, they listen to you, they help out around the house with chores, they get good grades, they don't get into trouble, then we subsidize them. We subsidize them with allowances. We subsidize them with more free time. We subsidize them when buying them things when they ask for it. Hey, I want to get a new bicycle. Well, if you want a new bicycle, mow the yard for 3 weeks, and then I'll go buy you a bicycle. Okay, that's a subsidy. On the other hand, we tax bad behavior, behaviors that we don't want. Instead of rewarding you, we penalize you if you're a child. So if you don't clean your room, if you don't do your chores, if you are disrespectful to your parents and adults, if you're a child and you don't get good grades and you don't do your chores, then parents tax them and take things away from them. Okay? If you don't clean your room, if you don't do your chores, I don't give you any money to go spend. I'll give you an allowance. If you don't use your free time productively, you get in trouble. We restrict your free time. We take less of it away. We put you on restriction as an example. Okay. If you don't get good grades, right, then maybe we take your car away. Those are examples of how we try and increase the supply of good behavior by subsidizing it, giving you allowances, free time, praise, trusting you more. And we tax bad behavior because we want less of it. We want less people not doing their chores, less people disobeying, and less people getting bad grades. So parents tax their children for the bad behaviors and subsidize the good ones. The next thing we have here is expectations of producers. Okay, here we're going to put common sense here. If you were a gasoline producer and you had gasoline in tanks at the facility, and you thought that there was going to be a war in the Middle East and that next week gas prices were going to double, what would you do? Would you sell that gas or hold it? Well, you might normally sell it. You now say, oh, if it's going to be double next week, I better save it so I can get double the price next week. So if you expect prices to go up in the future, you're going to restrict or decrease supply now. If, on the other hand, you expected prices to fall in the future, that would increase supply right now. I'd sell more of that gasoline in that tank now, knowing the price is going to be lower next week. The final thing we have is prices of other goods the firm can produce. just because you have a farm or a factory or a store doesn't mean you can only produce or sell one good. Many businesses, many firms, many producers, many farms can produce more than one good. A typical example of this is farms, okay? There is an inverse relationship between the prices of other goods the firm can produce and supply. A farm could produce beef cattle or corn, let's say. And George Bush implemented he forced gas producers to put 10% ethanol in their gasoline, which they wouldn't have done otherwise, but he said, you have to do it. When he did that, that massively increased the demand for corn, causing the price of corn to go up. So if the price of corn goes up, are farmers going to produce more or less corn? All other things being equal, they're going to produce more. That made corn farming more productive. Well, if the farm can produce corn or cattle, let's say they were 50% corn, 50% cattle for beef, and then all of a sudden the price of corn shoots up. Next time they plow their fields, what are they going to do? They're going to plow more pasture land. So maybe 75% of the farm will be in corn and only 25% in pasture for cows. That would cause a decrease in the supply of beef because the price of another good that the firm can produce, corn, went up. Our conclusion here is that changes in the non-price determinants of supply can produce only a shift of the supply curve. Now, in your mind, think about what the name of a shift in the supply curve is so you remember it. Think about it, get it in your mind. What is the name that we use to call a shift in the supply curve? Now, I'm going to give you two choices. Tell me which one is right. That a shift in the supply curve is a change in supply, or is it called a change in the quantity supplied? So we shift the demand curve back here. Okay, we're shifting this demand curve, or supply curve, I'm sorry. What is the name of that? What do we call it? These are all the things that can cause that. And we call that what? A change in supply. A movement along a supply curve, up or down, is something completely different. And that looks like this. Okay. Here we're at point A. Price goes up, moving us to point B. The name that we attach to that is a change in the quantity supplied. Okay. Now, on the market, buyers and sellers interact to determine the price and quantity of goods and services exchanged. When they do, we bring supply and demand together. And I'm going to show you the picture first. Okay, here's our demand curve. For tennis shoes, let's say, here's our supply curve. When we bring supply and demand together, they intersect because the nature of the curves. The demand curve is always downward sloping into the right because of that inverse relationship between the price of a good and quantities demanded. So as price goes down, quantity demanded moves in the opposite direction, it goes up. That is an inverse relationship. The demand curve has a negative slope. The supply curve, the law of supply says that as the price of a good or a service goes up, the quantity supplied increases. That is a positive slope. Where these two curves meet, we call that an equilibrium or an equilibrium point. Okay, that's very important. where those two curves meet is called an equilibrium point, and they meet at one and only one unique price, and that is the equilibrium price. When the market has a price equal to the equilibrium price, it is in equilibrium. There's a balance. Quantity demanded, if we trace $60 over to the demand curve, you can see 2,000 units are demanded. If we trace $60 over to the black supply curve, you can see 2,000 units are supplied. Quantity demanded, Q sub D, is equal to quantity supplied. The market is in equilibrium, and equilibrium is a balance. And equilibrium is a beautiful thing because at that equilibrium price, and only at that equilibrium price, we call it P star, and here P star happens to be $60. At that equilibrium price, everyone who wants to buy this good at that price, who's willing and able to purchase the good at a price of $60, there's someone to sell it to them. Everyone who wants to sell this good at the equilibrium price of $60, there's someone to buy it. The market's in balance. For every buyer, there's a seller. Every seller, there's a buyer. Any other price but that equilibrium price, and we get a problem. We get either a surplus or a shortage. If the market price, or if the government comes in and forces a price above equilibrium, say $90, that causes a problem. If we trace $90 over to the supply curve, you can see here, producers are willing and able to offer 3,000 pairs of tennis shoes for sale at that $90 price. But when we trace $90 over to the demand curve here, the green one, right, we see it's demand, go straight down here, you can see that consumers are only willing and able to purchase 1,000 shares. No longer up here is quantity demanded equal to quantity supplied. It's less than the amount that producers are willing and able to supply on the market. It's less than quantity supplied. So when this happens, producers have a problem. They accumulate inventories, okay? They have a surplus. They're off producing and offering more shoes for sale on the market every week than people are willing and able to purchase. So that's going to accumulate inventory. Stock is going to store, it's just going to start piling up in their stores and warehouses. The purpose of producing a pair of tennis shoes for the producers isn't to keep them in a warehouse, it's to sell them. So if they have a surplus, more is being offered for sale than people are willing to offer to buy. To get rid of those surpluses, firms are going to drop their price. As they drop their price, quantity supplied decreases. As you decrease the price of a good or a service, quantity demanded increases, and that will bring us back towards equilibrium. So the market self-corrects. If we have a surplus, the price is above the equilibrium price, that's going to cause a surplus of goods and services in that market. Suppliers are going to reduce the price so that they can sell that surplus. As they reduce the price, less gets offered for sale on the market, more is demanded by consumers. So we move back towards equilibrium and no one has to do anything about it. We don't need the government to come in and make the market do this. It does it on its own. In the opposite case, where we charge a price too low, say $30, trace that over to supply curve. Now, quantity supplied is only 1,000. So producers at a price of $30, they're only willing and able to offer for sale 1,000 pairs of tennis shoes. Notice that this price is below the equilibrium. However, at a price of $30, people want to buy more shoes. Okay, quantity demanded increases and is now 3,000 shoes. So we've got another problem here, a different one. Instead of quantity demanded being above quantity supplied, we have a situation where quantity demanded is now greater than. This is a cue, the quantity supplied. And that's called a shortage. People are willing and able to buy more tennis shoes in this case than suppliers are willing and able to offer for sale. Now, on a free market, this shortage goes away, and we know how it goes away. Just think about Auburn, Alabama football games. Okay. If you could get one from the schools, they might sell a 50-yard ticket for $200. Okay. But that price, more people are willing and able to buy the tickets than the school has available to sell. And that creates a shortage. When you have a shortage, you see lines and people waiting in line to get the tickets and then not getting them. They come and say, all right, we're out of tickets. Okay. And there's people who are still willing and able to buy them, but there are no more tickets to sell them. Okay. So that creates a shortage. The free market corrects that because suppliers of the tickets will raise the price. So people go and buy these tickets and then say, oh, there's people who really want to go. I could sell the ticket for more than I bought it for. So as the price increases, suppliers will increase their price. Demanders will drop out. Fewer people will be willing and able to pay those prices for the 50-yard ticket. And we move back towards equilibrium. And of course, we see this on the ticket websites, right? In years where Auburn and Alabama are both very good, that $200 ticket on the 50-yard line, if you try and sell it on StubHub or something, you can see that the price goes up to maybe $5,000. At a price of $5,000, the market equilibrates. Everyone who's willing and able to pay $5,000 for a 50-yard line ticket, there's someone to sell it to them. Everyone who wants to sell their ticket for $5,000, there's someone to buy it from them, and the market returns to equilibrium. Okay. So remember, the equilibrium price is the price where quantity demanded and the quantity supplied are equal. The market tends towards this price. There are three different views on this. There is what we'll call the hermeneutics position, and I'm gonna actually go a different way on this. I'm gonna stop my share here, and I'm gonna do this in a Word file so you can see it. Okay. So when we talk about how important that equilibrium price is, there's three different views. The first one, these groups of people are called hermeneuticians. Okay, and that's a funny word. Hermeneuticians comes from biblical scholarship. Hermeneutics is the study of biblical scripture. Okay, and the traditional view on biblical scripture is that Christ gave us all the information. All the information you need is in the Bible to achieve salvation, right? You can read the Bible, tells you what you should do, what you shouldn't do, etc. And that there are clear-cut, objective sins and non-sins, okay? Stealing is a sin, right? And it doesn't matter who you are. If you steal, it's a sin. However, there are groups of biblical scholars that get involved in hermeneutics, and they say, no. And they're usually sola scriptura types. They say that there's different forms of logic, that you and I could read the Bible and come up with completely different things, and they're both right. So I read the Bible and I say, well, it seems to me as if you can date a goat. It doesn't say you can't. Nowhere in the Bible does it say you cannot date a goat. Meanwhile, you read the Bible and say, no, you can't date a goat. We have a problem. Most religious denominations, at least mainline ones, they have a solution to this. I'm Catholic. You and I would, if we were both Catholics, we'd go to the priest first. We'd say, Father, he always says you can date a goat. I say you can't. The priest has read the Bible. He's been educated. That's what he does for a living. He might come in and say, nope, Yohe, you're wrong. Can't date a goat. He's just a man. He can make mistakes. Okay. So I might not agree with this. I say, no, I'm sticking to this. Then we could take this idea up to the bishop. The bishop is a more experienced. He's been around longer. He's the priest's boss. He's probably more well-educated, more well-read, more experienced with theology in the Bible. So we bring the argument to him. He says, Yohe, you're wrong. You can't date a goat. He's just a man. He can make mistakes. So eventually we'll work it up to the top. And in the Catholic Church, the top is the Pope. The Pope, the Catholic Church says that the Pope is infallible on issues of faith and morals when he speaks ex cathedra from the chair. And usually he writes it, he doesn't speak it. So the Pope might get this argument and he would write a papal document ex cathedra from the chair. And in it, he says, you cannot date a goat. Dating a goat is a sin. Now I got a problem. If I want to continue to say that it's okay to date a goat, that's fine, but I am not a Catholic. I'm excommunicated, okay? I can say it, but I'm excommunicated. Now I'm a Protestant. Protestant denominations have their own. Many of you might be Southern Baptists, right? You and I can have this argument. We go to the preacher at our church. The preacher would say, no, you can't date a goat. That's wrong. Okay, I don't agree with it. He's a man. We could go to the county, Etowah Southern Baptist County Commission, committee, right? Convention. And they would vote on it. And they say 7-3, you can't date a goat. You can't date a goat. Then if I don't like that, I could go to the main Southern Baptist Convention. They pass a vote. That's it. I can't date a goat, right? And if I want to say I can date a goat, I can. That's fine, but I'm not a Southern Baptist. So that's hermeneutic. It comes from these guys. These guys think different people have different forms of logic. Therefore, they think that there are no economic laws that would, the law of demand, the law of supply don't apply. So the hermeneuticians say that equilibrium is never reached. And they've got a good point here. If we ever reached equilibrium, at least on the economy as a whole, we'd all stop trading. If we reached it in a market, people would just stop trading in that market. Has there or will there ever be a time where people stop trading? And the answer is no. So they say that equilibrium is never reached and that the economy, and this is the key thing here for them, the economy does not tend toward equilibrium. Because there are no economic laws, like the law of demand, law of supply, etc., that the economy doesn't tend towards equilibrium. That it could just go off into outer space. It doesn't have to go towards equilibrium, okay? And that, of course, is a problem. The next group we have here is the Austrian position, and I'm going to do it last, but I'm going to put it in the middle because it's kind of the middle ground position. The third one is, this is the authors of your book, is what we call the neoclassical view. The neoclassicals say, we're going to say treat the economy as though it is always in equilibrium. Okay. Always in equilibrium. And that it immediately changes from one equilibrium to another. So if there's a change in the economy, the market goes from one equilibrium to the new one immediately. Okay, it's an instantaneous or immediate change. That's how they treat it. Now, this, of course, has problems. First off, if the economy is always in equilibrium, we'd be done trading. No one would need to trade anymore. All mutually beneficial exchanges would have been already made. And they say you could do this because they make an assumption that people have perfect information, that we all either know everything that there is about the market and it's equally dispersed, or that in any exchange, both sides have equal information. Now, this, of course, is a problem. If you go to a car lot, do you know where that car came from? Do you know how it was driven? And the answer is no. The salesman does. And when you go to buy a car, do you just look at the car and say, there's the price? Here's how much it's really worth. I'll take that. No. You ask the salesman questions about the car. Who had the car? Oh, a little old lady from Pasadena had this car. Okay. What did she use it for? Oh, just to drive back and forth to church on the highway. There's hardly any local mileage on it. It's a good car, right? Why did she trade it in? Oh, because she just wanted a new car. She just wanted a prettier one or whatever. Okay. On the other hand, that would change our opinion versus if he said, oh, it's owned by a guy who was an Uber driver here in town. He drove it all over town. He hardly ever had any highway miles on it. And he brought it in because the transmission was going on it and the engine's about to blow. Right? We want to know those things. Now, he's probably not going to tell us the engine's about to blow, but he might tell us who owned the car. Those are things we want to know. So we don't have perfect information either in the sense that we all know everything equally, or more likely the softer form of perfect information where both sides of an exchange know the same thing that the other side does. If that were the case, we'd never have salesmen. We wouldn't need them. Okay. And this other problem here is that the economy immediately or instantaneously adjusts to a new equilibrium. Okay, that has problems. The middle ground here is the Austrians. The Austrians say that the economy, that we never reach equilibrium. We're never in equilibrium, but the economy does or can move towards equilibrium. Here, we're never in equilibrium. We never get there. And that's because each and every time we make an exchange or go out on the markets, we learn new things. Okay? We go out, we buy things, we use them, we say, do these actually satisfy our wants and needs? Do they do a good job? Is there something better out there that I've used in the past? Is there something else out there that I think I could use that would better satisfy this need rather than the good that I have right now? And we learn new things. As we learn new things, that changes demand. So every time we go out on the market and act, we're really a different person because we now are different. We know more things about the world than we knew before. And this moves the supply or the demand curve if we had them, and moves them and causes equilibrium to change every time we move towards it. So we might keep moving towards equilibrium, but we never get there. Now, the question is, do we always move towards equilibrium? And some Austrians would say no. We do so when we're correct and make the right decision, but we move away from equilibrium when we make a mistake. Okay, and human beings make mistakes. So if you looked at these three views, this idea that equilibrium is never reached and the economy does not tend towards equilibrium, these people tend to be nihilist. They would say that we know nothing about reality, okay? These guys right here say we never make mistakes and we know everything about reality, or at least that we have an equal knowledge. If that were true, you wouldn't be sitting here in this class because you'd already know what I know. The reason you go to college or go to school is because you believe, hopefully so, that the instructor knows more about the subject than you do. The reason you talk to the salesperson is you believe he knows more about the car than you do. Okay. So here, no mistakes are made. Here, we know nothing. Almost everything could be a mistake. And then the Austrian position here is that we do know things about reality, countering the hermeneuticians, but we don't know everything. And because we don't know everything, when we are correct, we move towards equilibrium. And when we are wrong, we move away from equilibrium. Okay. I think I forgot to share the screen on that. So I will cut that in here real quick. I think I did it. So everything I just said is here on this Word document. Here's the hermeneuticians. Equilibrium's never reached. The economy does not tend towards equilibrium. These guys are the nihilists. They think that we know nothing about reality, okay? Which I wish they just stopped talking, because if they were true, then they're not telling me anything new or interesting. The neoclassicals here, that's the textbook authors, they treat the economy as though it's always in equilibrium, and that the economy instantly adjusts from one equilibrium to another one. And that's because they have an assumption of perfect information or perfect knowledge. They believe that either we all know everything, which of course isn't true. Then there's a smaller version that says that everybody knows the same thing, that the buyer and the seller know the exact same thing about the product. If that were true, we wouldn't need salespeople and we wouldn't have teachers, because we all know everything or the same thing. The Austrian position is here, and that is that we never are in equilibrium, but we either do or can move towards equilibrium. Okay. The Austrians would say that we know some things about reality, so we're not up here. We don't know everything about reality, so we're not down here. So because of that, we make mistakes. When we make mistakes, that moves us away from equilibrium. When we don't make mistakes, when we're correct, it moves us towards it. But every time we move towards it or away from it, the equilibrium itself changes. Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry about the writing. I'm getting some better technology so that I can write on the screens. Thank you very much and have a great day. Goodbye.